So obviously, Becca just joined us, and we're so excited to have her today. And she obviously gave a little bio about her, and we're so excited for her to talk about her Instagram Buzzcut post and also experiences in her activism. So without further ado, if Becca wants to give us a little talk about her advocacy and what she's experienced.
Sure. Okay. So hello again, everybody. Like I said, I'm Rebecca. I'm an 18-year-old Latina activist from Queens, New York. I am currently involved in numerous organizations, but Girl Up having to be the most prominent organization that I've been a part of. I first joined Girl Up when I was 14 and joining high school. I, thought that the club was interesting. I thought that the club had really good, just like a really good description. And I walk into the club and there's like over 500 people. I mean, not 500 people, I wish, right? There's over 100 people. And, as a small introverted freshman, I was kind of terrified because I really wanted to sort of do something with my high school career, but I wasn't sure if being with so many people was the right idea. So after a couple months of doing that, I really fell in love with the work and poured my heart and soul into it. And eventually it paid off, and I got to serve as a teen advisor for the 2019 to 2020 and 2018 to 2019 teen advisor class. And through that, I realized a lot of things. First was that imposter syndrome is a very real thing in advocacy. I'm sure that many of you have probably had a struggle with it at some point in your advocacy, and if you haven't, you most likely will. It's such a difficult thing to overcome, and you don't even realize that it's coming until it's already there. And it sort of feels like you're in a room sitting with 10 people, and you have to ask yourself, do I really belong here? I'm looking around and I see people who, one, are more involved than me, two, are more experienced than me. They have better, experiences, and they have better resumes than I do. Why should I be here? Why do I wield this power? And I think that it's a tough conversation to have with yourself. And many times we don't normalize mental health, and we don't normalize having those conversations with ourselves. So know that by already facing this, you're stepping into a world that many adults haven't even done. And you're putting aside your ego to sort of look at yourself from a different perspective, which not only helps you become a better advocate, but it also helps you become a better person. So throughout that time with Girl Up, I was exposed to many different stories, whether it would be my teen advisor stories from the international scope. We had a teen advisor from Lebanon. We had a teen advisor from Syria. It really made me realize how privileged I am, not only to live in the United States, but to be a white woman. And I think that that's really important, especially in advocacy, is to acknowledge your privileges, and to sort of set aside your own ego and give aid and give a platform to people who don't have that privilege. So that's why I started the Buzzcut post. I really wanted to highlight stories that would otherwise not get proper media attention. When you look at CNN and you look at major news networks, it's a very United States scope. We don't really pay attention to what's happening internationally. And when you do have the perspective internationally, it's usually from a white person. So knowing that I could create something with all the resources that I've been given from such a young age to highlight people, unlike how the media has done now, was so important, and I needed to do it immediately. And that's exactly what I did. And it was definitely difficult. When you're creating your own organization, you have so many ideas, and you're not really sure if you can put them down. You can put them down on paper quite easily, but you're not sure if you can actually start the foundation and build the network. And I have to say that you can. Even if you have 10 followers or if you have 18,000 followers, it doesn't matter. Your friends, your followers know somebody who will know somebody who will know somebody. Eventually, your network will build, and it will be difficult at the beginning. It doesn't even matter if you have a lot of followers. It will be difficult. But the important work is to stay driven to what you want to do and to really push yourself to an uncomfortable position. And that leads me to my next point, where advocacy is so driven in being in an uncomfortable position. And if you're not in those uncomfortable spaces, are you really a good advocate? And I don't mean that you haven't done the work. It's just that to be a better person and to be a better advocate, you have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and learn from people. Because I was very stuck in my own worldview when I was in the early stages of activism. I was so stuck on my morals, and I was very stuck on my political views and how I've seen the world. But speaking to people who have seen the world drastically different from me made me realize, okay, maybe I'm kind of being a mean person. I'm not listening to people. I'm hearing people, but I'm not listening to them. And I think that that's incredibly important. And I advise all of you to do that, is to listen to your colleagues, no matter how young they may be. They all have a story. And I think we've realized that, as teen advocates and as young adults now stepping into this new adult world, we've seen how many people belittle younger individuals. We've seen how they don't take us seriously. We've seen how they have pushed us aside and said, you haven't really experienced the world, so come back to me when you have. And that's not true. So many of us have so many stories that are so powerful that when given the chance would blow so many adults' minds. And it made them realize that, okay, kids have grown up in a different space this year and in the past years because we have social media. And social media is such a powerful tool, and it has given us all the privilege to sort of step outside of our own privileges and pay attention to what's happening globally. It has given us a worldview into Nigeria. It's given us a worldview into Lebanon. It's given us a worldview into Syria and China. And that's something that modern media hasn't done. And it's still not doing it. So knowing that you have a power in your own cell phone to sort of communicate to somebody across the world, hone that, use that, and own that. Because it scares adults so much, and it's okay to scare adults. They need to be scared. They need to be humbled. Because, when you have 500 girls knocking on your door saying, hey, this is what I'm passionate about, someone has to listen. Someone has to be like, why are these people here? Why are so many young people here? And we've seen in this past election that young people showed up more than ever, and it paid off. So knowing that we have a lot of power, no matter if you're 14 or 23, it really doesn't matter. There's power in different ways. The minute you become 18, yes, you may have the power to vote, but if you're 14, you still have power to go out into the polls and help people. You still have power to talk about who's running on the ballot. No matter how old you are, there is no excuse anymore to not be an activist. But I think that also leads to the next point, performative activism. We have seen many times, especially this year, how performative activism has taken over and has sort of compromised many organizations and many movements. We saw it with Black Lives Matter and the Black Squares, and it was like, was that really the right move? And we've seen now that so many people posted about it, but what's the work after? You voted in someone who believes in that movement, but what are you going to do to continue that and ensure that more people don't get killed in his presidency, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that you should use your power to call out performative activism. I know that they say that that's cancel culture, but I have a whole nother thing about cancel culture. It's important to call out people and make mistakes, because you will make mistakes, and that's okay, but you have to own them and you have to grow from them. Many of you are college students or high school students, so you can look back and think, do I really have the same mindset that I did in middle school? And you don't. You most likely do not, because I know I didn't, and I still don't have the same mindset that I did in middle school. So it's okay to make mistakes, and you just have to push forward and really own that and sort of say, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm growing. Come back to me in 2 months and we can have this conversation so you can see my development. So if you see performative activism on your screen, DM them. You don't have to come out hostile, like guns blazing, etc. You can just have a conversation about it. What are you doing? How are you affecting this community? What's your plan for the next 2 months? And if they don't have one, this is the perfect opportunity for you to step up and say, let's plan one. Let's have a conversation. Let's put you in these uncomfortable situations so that you can learn how important and how dire this movement is. And because of that, I was stepping into the college space, and Girl Up from that point on kind of stops a little bit. It's not as, you're not at your peak. So I joined the Female Quotient, which is simply about, being an adult and having those adult spaces of equality and equity. And I'm still working with that, and I'm still doing that. So I'll get back to you in 4 years, hopefully. But that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. I feel like you touched on so many points that like I hadn't even thought about, like the imposter syndrome. Like I've definitely like walked into like organizer rooms and been like, I don't do that much. Like they do so much more than me. Like, am I like supposed to be here? And I feel like you really brought that to my mind. I hadn't even thought about that. But we're going to get started with some questions that we're going to start with. I'm sorry, I just repeated myself. But how do you feel your usage of social media has changed your experience with advocacy?
It has changed it drastically. Um, I think growing a following over the past few years, it's not much, but like it's grown significantly from when I first started in high school. Um, it's made me realize how important your voice is on social media and how easy it is to make a mistake. You can post something that you may think is so powerful, but you don't realize that you're offending somebody, or you don't realize that you didn't do something right in the post. And I think that social media has aided me in having those tough conversations with people and really listening. Um, but it's also been a negative source in terms of, hate. There has definitely been a 60-year-old white man who has come in my DMs and said, "You suck," blah, 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 blah. And I advise all of you, if you ever get stuff like that, whether it be from a 60-year-old or someone who's like 14, to sit down and have a conversation with them through virtually or through the DMs, and sort of say, why do you hate me this much? What's the point? And if you're not in that mental space, which I have to really like hone in on, your mental health is so important. And sometimes we forget that as activists. We're so focused on the larger issues at hand, but your mental health should be your top priority. So sometimes people will come into your DMs and want to have conversations. Either they want to be educated or they're just bashing on you. And it is okay to be like, I would love to have this conversation, but I can't do it right now because I am just not mentally here. I'm not mentally okay right now. But come back to me. I'll reach out to you when I'm ready. And it sort of puts that person at the receiving hand being like, damn, okay, maybe I shouldn't come out with guns blazing. Maybe this ruined that person's day. Maybe next time, if I want to talk to this person or talk to somebody else who I disagree with, I'll come in a little bit nicer. And sometimes it just won't work. There are just some people on the internet who are trolls to be trolls. And just ignoring those people and learning to grow from that, and knowing that it's not an attack on you, but it's just it's an attack for an attack purpose, and not because of you. Knowing that is important, and just make sure that, social media has been so powerful in the way that I use advocacy and reaching out to other girls globally, but I have to prioritize my mental health. And I've realized that within this past year.
Thank you so much for that answer. That was great. So our next question is, what kind of impact were you hoping to have on people through Buzz Cut Post?
I definitely, when I was first starting, I wasn't thinking about it. I was like, I just need to do this. I don't care if no one reads it. I don't care if everybody reads it. I just need to post this. I need to create this. And since then, I've sort of reflected back and seen how many people have loved the content and seen how many people have received it. Now I'm realizing, okay, if I was 14 and I was, scouring the internet, or if I was 12 and I see something like this, I would be incredibly happy knowing that there are people globally who are doing the work and putting in the change. Because as a 14-year-old in 2016, I sort of felt forced to have to become an activist. I felt like I can't really have fun. I need to change the world. and eventually it became fun, but at the beginning it seemed like a chore. So knowing that there could be people out there who want to get involved with activism but don't want it to feel like a chore, but seeing people globally who are doing the work and sort of calming down is really what I was hoping would happen. Um, Seeing the issues that are happening globally, it gets very overwhelming very quickly. And people tell you to pay attention to all issues, even though you can't really do that. You can pay attention to as much as you can, but at some point it has to stop. So knowing that, okay, I want to focus on American politics, or I want to focus on my own community, but I am worried about what's happening in Nigeria. So having somebody who's posted on BuzzCut posts who says, I'm working directly to end SARS in Nigeria, I'm focusing on human rights violations, et cetera, knowing, okay, there's somebody who's doing that and there's a community to back them up, I can sort of sit back and focus on my work and my community. So that's really the main point of BuzzCut post.
Amazing, thank you. So as a college student, I can imagine you're pretty busy with school. So how do you think you manage to dedicate yourself to both at the same time?
I am still learning. I didn't realize how much work college would be until I entered college. And it was sort of a slap in the face for sure. But I'm still learning to manage it. In high school, I was given a lot more free time. I did the homework quickly so I could go out and go to events. But I think with COVID and this new virtual platform that we've sort of been forced into, it has become easier, but I'm noticing that I'm having things like Zoom fatigue when I'm in a lecture and I'm like, I really don't want to be here. I'd rather be somewhere else. So I'm definitely still learning to manage it, but I would say having a planner is like one of the best things to do for yourself. I would consider myself a pretty organized person, but I can get messy at times. And that planner has sort of been this grounding feature in my life that has said, okay, everything may be chaotic right now, but this is the one thing that's organized and is telling you what to do, which has been so beneficial for me. But I think finding what works for you and noticing your habits and your styles and how you learn and how much time you take. But also noticing that college is a lot of work and it drains you mentally, especially with COVID. You're trying to focus on staying safe and keeping your family safe, but also passing your class and handing this essay on time, but you're also focused on what's happening in the US and what's happening around the world. It gets so draining so quickly. So really prioritizing what's important to you and sort of setting those boundaries with yourself, knowing that, okay, I need to write this essay, but I'm not going to do it the night before, even though that's a lie to myself because I know tomorrow. But setting those boundaries within yourself, saying, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days on this essay, but I'm going to spend an hour every day so that I can designate an hour to social media activism, or I can donate my time to a Zoom call. So really planning those things out in advance has helped tremendously. But it's okay not to have a path and not to have a handle on it right now because of the COVID pandemic. It's left so many people in this unprecedented, uncertain time. So while your professors may say that, you need to be organized and you need to be on top of everything, it is okay not to. But just make sure to check in and find a handle on it.
Hey, so, being an activist and, managing your time with like distributing which causes you're going to go and advocate for, what do you suggest to avoid activism burnout?
Mm. Ooh, that's a good question. I definitely suffered from burnout around my junior year of high school. And many of you probably know why I suffered junior year burnout. There's so much happening in school and there's so much happening within the activist field. What I would suggest is really like having a conversation with yourself. It may seem a little bit crazy, why am I talking to myself out loud? But it's so beneficial to sort of get everything off of your chest and say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. Because when you keep it all in here, it can easily get very jumbled up. You know, you think you have a plan, and then you show up to school the next day and they're like, SAT or test tomorrow. And you're like, that throws my whole thing off balance. So sort of writing everything down and speaking it into the universe, but also knowing it's okay to take a break. You know, focus, if you want to focus on school because that's a major importance. And I think that, you know, sometimes we forget that school is really important, but it is really important, and it's okay to sort of take a break from advocacy, and say, okay, I just need to focus on midterms right now. Know that there are people out there who will take over and will, you know, do the work for you. And if you need a community, there is a community waiting for you. Whether it be your followers, your friends, your family, or just the activist community in general. If you know that you can't deliver, it's okay. It's fine. Prioritize your mental health. And if you say that you want to take a break from education and you want to focus solely on activism, it may be shunned on, but that's okay. You know, you can take a break from education because sometimes it gets very draining very quickly. Knowing what works best for you, regardless of what the public tells you, just talk to yourself. Have that conversation with yourself. You may look a little bit insane at first, but you notice that it's really good for you. And you know, people may not like it. People may not like that you're having your own reign on your own body and your own mind. But it's a stigma, I know, to take care of yourself, but you should do it for sure. Don't care what people tell you. Focus on yourself and know yourself.
Great, thank you so much. So now that we've asked some of our questions, I think we're going to open it up if anyone else has any questions about advocacy or about Becca in general, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, I'm going to ask my question. Becca knows me, so not very exciting, but Becca, I know that you were a poll worker during this election, and I saw you posting all sorts of stuff about the election and enjoyed all of your posts, as always. But I'd love to hear more about your experience as a poll worker during this election and just this election in general, experiencing it.
This election and poll working experience were both very exhausting. I'll speak specifically on poll working first. That's like from 5 a.m. to about 10 p.m. or wherever you're released, depending on your area. And not sitting down for the entire day was definitely something that was I haven't done for a long time, thanks to the COVID. But it was completely worth it to know that we're helping people you know, cast their votes and cast their ballots, because when you're there, you realize how many people don't know how to vote, and you realize how that's an act of voter suppression, because you know they don't teach this at school. They don't teach you how to vote at school. They don't teach you how to vote on the internet. You know, luckily, because so many people were motivated to vote, we saw a big push on social media. But when you look back at the 2016 election or the 2012 election, there weren't these resources to teach you how to vote. And I think it's especially prominent within the immigrant community, who are now citizens and who can vote, because you know they were just never taught this, and they were told that their voice doesn't really matter, because they're not, you know, born and bred within the United States. And I think that that's a major issue that needs to be addressed more. And I'm glad that I could be there and sort of serve some assistance. But I think that needs to be a focus for not only the 2024 election, but you know, next year's city council election, and just knowing that those are just as important as the presidential run. But coming back to this major election, it was definitely draining, you know, watching the debates and seeing and who's going to be the Democratic nominee, and you know, watching the states for the entire week, literally from Tuesday to Saturday, just glued to my TV, my phone, my computer. Whenever I had to go out, I'd be like this and be like, okay, who's winning in this state? Who's winning in what state? And it got draining so fast. But just knowing that you can take a break, you know, for sure you will find out who won. There is no question about it. And it's okay to sort of feel that fear of missing out, because I was asleep when it was announced, and I was so upset when I woke up. I was like, are you kidding me? I literally was glued at my TV for days, and then the minute it's announced, I'm asleep. But I think that's okay. It means that you're being civically virtuous. You know, you want to be an active participant of society. You want to see who won. And regardless of who won, I think it's important to know that you showed up and you showed out and you did everything that you could. And regardless of who won, you know that you have to do the work for 4 more years. Sure, we have voted back in kindness and we have voted back in hope, I guess, but that's not going to solve all the systematic issues that we have within the United States, like systematic oppression, racism, and discrimination, and these systems of exploitation. We have to continue fighting for these things and demolishing these foundations that were built on white supremacy. And just because, you know, we voted someone back in who doesn't believe in white supremacy, it doesn't mean that these things are going to change overnight. You know, when the Obama administration when we were living through the Obama administration, there was still black on black crime. There were still people getting shot daily. There were still hate crimes happening. We were still bombing the Middle East. There are so many things that we needed to unpack. And just because we had the first person of color as the president and this kind person in power, it doesn't mean that all of these issues were, you know, put at hold and stopped. They were still happening. So I think that even though this election was definitely a nail biter and it left us at the edge of our seats many times, we have to continue to sort of push and be out on the streets and fighting for what we believe in. But just know that you have somebody in power who will genuinely listen. And that in the next 4 years, in the 8 years, and many years after that, or even next year, that you have the power to vote in people and that you can run, and that you might know people who should run. It's, you know, we've seen so many times that, okay, we think I can't really run for office because I'm not a lawyer or I'm not properly educated in that department, et cetera, et cetera. But we have seen with the 2018 election, it doesn't really matter what you do. As long as you have a passion and you want to change your community, run for office. And even if you don't win, you're changing your community in some form. And in the future, whether it be next year or in the next 20 years, you might have changed that community drastically just by running or stating that you want to run. So I implore all of you to think about it for sure. You don't have to, obviously, but I implore all of you to run or to do the work for an election, whether it be for city council, especially for city council, because we need more poll workers for city council elections. But it's a lot of work.